My family mocked my pointless military career, until their idolized CEO saluted me as colonel, and made their faces turned pale with fear. They mocked my uniform before they ever saw it. Jasper's smirk, Aunt Candace's backhanded compliments, my father's apologetic glances, all telling me to make myself smaller, less noticeable. "You're used to discomfort, right?" they said, pointing me to the basement while they took the upstairs bedrooms. What they didn't know was that I'd commanded elite units through sandstorms and gunfire, that generals stood when I entered rooms, that I carried the weight of fallen friends like Mikey Gow on my shoulders every day. They never asked, so I never told them. Colonel Lane Whitaker existed in classified briefings and combat zones, never at family dinners, until the day their precious CEO walked through the front door, snapped to attention, and saluted me in front of everyone. "It's an honor, ma'am," he said. And just like that, their carefully constructed narrative crumbled. They wanted a failure to feel better about themselves. Instead, they got me. The familiar scent of pine and cinnamon hit me as soon as I stepped through the front door of my childhood home. For years, it had been 4 years since I'd walked these halls, felt the slight creak of the third floorboard from the entryway, or heard the gentle hum of the aging furnace working overtime during the holiday season. "Lane, you made it." My mother, Emma, rushed toward me with open arms. Her embrace felt like the only genuine welcome I would receive today. I had deliberately dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a cream sweater, and boots, nothing that would hint at my real life, nothing that would start the conversations I wasn't ready to have. "Hey, Mom." I squeezed her tight, inhaling the familiar scent of her lavender perfume. "Sorry I'm late. The roads were worse than I expected." "Nonsense. You're here now. That's all that matters." She pulled back, hands still on my shoulders, examining me with motherly scrutiny. "You look thin. Are they feeding you properly?" Before I could answer, my father appeared in the hallway. Dale Whitaker, regional sales manager at Reichner Industries, pillar of the community, and perpetually disappointed father. There she is. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he approached for an awkward side hug. "Good to see you, kiddo." He glanced at my duffel bag, standard military issue though unmarked. "Let's get you settled before everyone arrives. We've got a full house this year." As I followed him toward the stairs, he slowed his pace and lowered his voice. "Listen, Lane, about tonight, maybe don't go into too much detail about your, work stuff. You know how Aunt Patricia gets with her questions, and Candace will just use it as ammunition." I'd barely been home 2 minutes, and already the dismissal of my entire career had begun. "Sure, Dad," I replied, my tone deliberately neutral. "Wouldn't want to cause any drama." He nodded, missing the edge in my voice. Good. "Oh, and we've got you set up in the basement. Hope that's okay. Your cousins took the guest rooms, and with Candace and Roger in the blue room." "The basement is fine," I said. "I was used to worse." "Much worse." "Great. You're used to discomfort, right?" He chuckled at his own joke, but I didn't join in. The basement had been hastily prepared, an old futon made up with mismatched sheets, a space heater humming in the corner, and boxes of Christmas decorations stacked against the wall. This was apparently my place in the family hierarchy now. I set my bag down and took a deep breath. 4 days. I just needed to survive 4 days. 2 hours later, the house was filled with the chaos of extended family. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Greg arrived with their children, my cousins Jasper and Bryn. Aunt Candace and Uncle Roger followed shortly after with their daughter Sloane. The air buzzed with conversation about promotions, vacations, and neighborhood gossip. I stood in the kitchen helping my mother with the final dinner preparations when Jasper sauntered in, phone in hand, designer watch glinting on his wrist. Well, if it isn't G.I. Jane," he smirked, leaning against the counter. At 32, Jasper was 4 years my senior and never let me forget it. "Still playing soldier, Lane?" I continued chopping carrots without looking up. "It's good to see you too, Jasper. Seriously though, when are you going to get a real job? You know, one with actual prospects." He reached over to snag an olive from a nearby platter. Dad says the military is just welfare for people who couldn't cut it in the private sector. My knife paused mid-chop. I could feel my mother tense beside me. Jasper, honey, she intervened, would you take these rolls to the dining room? He shrugged and grabbed the basket, but not before adding, just saying, "'Cause some of us have actual careers." As he left, my mother touched my arm gently. Don't mind him. He's just Jasper. I nodded, resuming my chopping with perhaps more force than necessary. What would they say if they knew? If they could see the classified commendations locked in my apartment safe, if they knew what Colonel Lane Whitaker had endured and accomplished? But they didn't know, and part of me wanted to keep it that way. Dinner was an exercise in restraint. I sat at the far end of the table, wedged between Sloane and the edge of the room, while everyone else discussed bonuses, promotions, and vacation homes. Lane, Aunt Candace called across the table, glass of wine in hand, "You look healthy. Military food must be better than we here." "It's fine," I replied simply. "Such a shame you never settled down with someone stable," she continued, seemingly oblivious to the discomfort she was causing. "You know, Amanda Wilson's daughter married that surgeon from Boston, 2 kids already and a house in the suburbs." "I'm happy with my choices," I said, forcing a smile. "Of course you are, dear." Her tone suggested otherwise. I caught sight of Bryn whispering something to Jasper. Both of them glanced my way before stifling laughter. It stung more than I expected. Bryn had once looked up to me, following me around during family gatherings, asking about my dreams. Now, at 23, she had clearly adopted the family's collective judgment. My father cleared his throat. "Well, we have exciting news. Jasper has been offered a position in the marketing department at Reichner." The table erupted in congratulations. "It's not a big deal," Jasper said with false modesty. "Just putting my MBA to good use." "Not a big deal?" Uncle Roger boomed. "Working under the same roof as your uncle at one of the most prestigious companies in the country, that's the kind of smart career move that builds a future." I felt eyes flicker toward me, the unspoken comparison hanging in the air, and my father added, practically beaming, "Mr. Reichner himself is stopping by tomorrow morning. He's in town for the holiday charity gala and wanted to discuss the Simpson account." Aunt Patricia gasped. "Callum Reichner coming here?" "Yes," Dad confirmed, unable to hide his pride. "It's a tremendous opportunity to show him the kind of family values Reichner Industries is built on." I pushed my food around my plate, suddenly not hungry. I knew what that meant. I was part of the family that needed to be hidden away, not showcased. Later, as I helped clear the dishes, I overheard my father on the phone in his study. "Yes, sir, everything is prepared for your visit tomorrow. No inconvenience at all. We're honored." "Truly." A pause. "Oh, my daughter?" "Yes, she's visiting, but, well, she's in the military." "Nothing special. Just." "Yes, I understand the company's commitment to veterans, but perhaps we could focus on Jasper's potential. He's got a real head for business." I set down the stack of plates I was carrying, my hands suddenly unsteady. "Nothing special." The words echoed in my mind, joining a chorus of similar dismissals I'd heard over the years. A flash of memory hit me, the scorching heat of the desert, the weight of responsibility as I led my unit through hostile territory. The mission that had earned me my rank had been classified, the details known only to a select few, but it had been anything but nothing special. I slipped outside onto the back porch, needing air. The night was cold and clear, stars visible despite the neighborhood lights. I pulled my phone from my pocket, tempted to call Commander Gutierrez to hear a voice that understood what I'd accomplished, what I'd sacrificed. Instead, I put the phone away and stared into the darkness. This was supposed to be my refuge, my home. Yet I felt more alone here than I ever had in the field. The door opened behind me, and my mother stepped out, a cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders. "It's freezing out here," she said, coming to stand beside me. "I needed some air." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "They don't mean to be." She trailed off, unable to find the right words. "Yes, they do, Mom." She didn't argue, just reached over and squeezed my hand. In that gesture was everything she couldn't say aloud, love mixed with helplessness. She was caught between her husband's world and her daughter's, unable to bridge the gap. I clenched my jaw and took a deep breath of the cold night air. 4 days. I just needed to survive 4 days. The first light of dawn filtered through the small basement window, casting long shadows across the floor. I'd been awake for hours, my body still on military time, my mind refusing to settle in this house full of memories and expectations. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back at boot camp 6 years earlier. The drill sergeant's voice echoed in my ears as I pushed through another set of push-ups, ignoring the snickers from some of the male recruits. "Whitaker, you call those push-ups? My grandmother could do better, and she's been dead for 10 years. I gritted my teeth and pushed harder, arms trembling but refusing to give in. By the end of that day, I'd outperformed all but 2 of the men in my unit. The snickers had faded, replaced by grudging respect. The memory dissolved as footsteps creaked overhead. The house was waking up. I changed quickly into running clothes and slipped out before anyone could corner me for morning small talk. The familiar streets of Oak Ridge looked smaller somehow, the landmarks of my youth diminished by time and experience. I ran past my old high school, the park where I'd had my first kiss, the recruitment office where I'd signed my papers against my father's wishes. 5 miles later, I stopped at the small memorial park on the edge of town. My breath formed clouds in the cold morning air as I walked among the stones honoring local veterans. None of them knew about the missions I'd led, the lives I'd saved and lost. Sergeant Mikey Gau's face flashed in my mind, his quick smile, his terrible jokes, his unwavering loyalty. I could still hear his voice over the radio that day, "Colonel, I've got eyes on the target. Moving to secure the perimeter." Those were the last words he ever spoke. The ambush had been swift and deadly. I'd given the orders that put him in position. He died protecting me and our unit. I touched the memorial stone, though Mikey's name wasn't on it. His sacrifice, like so many others, remained classified, known but unacknowledged, like me and my own family. By the time I returned to the house, breakfast was in full swing. Aunt Candace was holding court at the dining table, talking animatedly about the CEO's impending visit. "Dale, you should put out those crystal glasses we gave you last Christmas. Make a proper impression." My father nodded eagerly. "Good idea. And I've already prepared some talking points about the new marketing strategy." "Jasper," Aunt Patricia chimed in, "make sure you mention your thesis on corporate expansion strategies. Mr. Reichner will be impressed by your foresight." I slipped past them toward the kitchen, hoping to grab coffee unnoticed, but Bryn spotted me. "Well, look who decided to join the land of the living," she smirked. "Sleep well in the dungeon?" "Just fine, thanks." I reached for a mug. "We're planning the seating arrangement for Mr. Reichner's visit," Aunt Candace announced, barely glancing my way. "Lane, perhaps you could help your mother prepare some refreshments while we chat with him." Translation: stay out of sight. "Sure," I said, taking my coffee and heading back toward the basement. "I need to shower anyway." As I passed the living room, I noticed Sloane sitting alone, scrolling through her phone. At 15, she was caught in that awkward space between childhood and adulthood, too young to join the important conversations, but too old to be dismissed entirely. "Morning, Sloane," I offered. She looked up, a small smile breaking through her typical teenage reserve. "Hey, Aunt Lane. Not joining the strategy session?" She rolled her eyes. "Mom says I need to present well when the CEO comes. Whatever that means, probably just wants me to stay quiet and look pretty." I laughed, recognizing a kindred spirit. "Well, if you need a break from all this excitement, I'll be hiding out downstairs." "Thanks," she said, and for a moment I saw a flash of the admiration Brain used to show me. It warmed something inside that had been cold for too long. Later that morning, I found myself helping my mother in the kitchen while everyone else scattered to prepare for Callum Reichner's arrival. I was chopping vegetables for a veggie tray, a task deemed appropriate for my skill set, apparently. "So," Mom began cautiously, "how are things really going with your work?" I considered my answer carefully. How much could I say? How much would she understand? "It's challenging, rewarding. I'm good at what I do, Mom. I never doubted that, she said softly. Your father just worries, after what happened to your Uncle James in Vietnam. I knew. My father's brother had returned from war a changed man, haunted by what he'd seen. Dad had spent my childhood telling me military service was a dead end, a waste of potential. He'd never forgiven me for enlisting. He's proud of you, you know, in his own way. I didn't respond to that. The evidence suggested otherwise. And what about you? I asked, changing the subject. How's the book club? We fell into safer topics as we worked, the rhythm of cooking creating a temporary peace between us. But a heaviness lingered in my chest, all the unspoken truths forming a barrier even my mother couldn't cross. That evening, I escaped to the basement early, claiming fatigue from my trip. In reality, I couldn't bear another minute of listening to everyone fawn over Jasper's career prospects and speculate about impressing Callum Reichner. I pulled out an old notebook from my duffel bag, leather-bound, worn at the edges from years of travel. Inside were quotes, observations, goals I'd set as a young cadet. Mikey had given me the notebook after our first successful mission together. Write it all down, Whitaker, he'd said. Someday you'll want to remember how far you've come. I flipped through the pages, tracing his name where it appeared. Mikey had believed in me from the beginning, had seen my potential when others dismissed me. His faith had carried me through the darkest moments of my career. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I quickly closed the notebook. Come in. Sloane peeked around the door. Hey, sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me. What's up? She stepped inside, glancing around the makeshift bedroom. Mom sent me to see if you needed extra blankets, but really I just wanted to escape the Jasper show upstairs. I laughed. That bad? Worse. He's practicing his handshake in the mirror. She rolled her eyes. Can I hang out here for a bit? Sure. I moved some clothes off the futon to make room. Fair warning though, it's not exactly the Ritz down here. Better than listening to Mom and Aunt Patricia debate which tie Dad should wear tomorrow. She sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. So, what's it really like being in the military? The question caught me off guard. No one in my family ever asked about my actual experience. It's complicated, I began. There are hard days, really hard days. But there's also this sense of purpose, of being part of something bigger than yourself. Do you ever get scared? All the time, I admitted. But you learn to function despite the fear, to make decisions even when you're terrified. She nodded, absorbing this. Mom thinks I have anxiety issues because I get nervous before school presentations. Everyone gets nervous, Sloane. Even people who seem completely confident. Even you. Especially me. I smiled. Before every mission, every briefing with high-ranking officers, every difficult decision. But you do it anyway. I do it anyway. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she spoke again. They don't get it, do they? The rest of them. What you actually do? No, I said softly. They don't. Another knock at the door interrupted us. Aunt Candace's voice called out, Sloane, are you down there? It's time to go over your outfit for tomorrow. Sloane sighed. Coming, Mom. She stood reluctantly. Thanks, Aunt Lane. Anytime, kiddo. After she left, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Commander Gutierrez's number. Before I could talk myself out of it, I hit call. She answered on the third ring. Colonel Whitaker. This is unexpected. Commander. The familiar formality in her voice centered me. Sorry to call so late. No apology necessary. How's civilian life treating you? I hesitated. It's an adjustment. That bad, huh? I could hear the smile in her voice. Family still doesn't know. No. And at this point, I'm not sure they'd believe me if I told them. Their loss. There was a sharpness to her tone that I appreciated. The Pentagon is still buzzing about the Nikolai extraction. General Waters mentioned your name in the briefing yesterday. I was just doing my job. No, you weren't. You are exceeding every expectation, as usual. She paused. We miss you here, Lane. The temporary assignment ends in 3 weeks. Have you thought about what's next? Every day, I admitted, but I haven't decided yet. Well, whatever you choose, you've earned it. Remember that. After we hung up, I lay back on the futon, staring at the ceiling. Commander Gutierrez's words echoed in my mind, you've earned it. Had I? Sometimes I wasn't sure. Sometimes the weight of Mikey's death and all the others overshadowed everything I'd accomplished. I reached into my bag and pulled out a challenge coin, a special one given to me by my unit after the mission that earned me my promotion to colonel. The metal was cool against my palm, the engraved symbols a reminder of oaths taken and kept. For the first time since arriving home, I allowed myself to cry quietly in the basement where no one could hear me. For Mikey, for the person I'd been before war changed me, for the family connections I might never repair. Tomorrow, Callum Reichner would arrive, and my family would continue pretending I was nothing special. And I would continue letting them believe it, because what else could I do? Morning arrived with a flurry of activity upstairs. The heavy footsteps and urgent voices told me that CEO Day preparations were in full swing. I dressed in simple jeans and a blue sweater, nice enough to be presentable, but not trying too hard. What was the point? When I emerged from the basement, the house had transformed. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, the good china was set out on the dining table, and everyone was dressed like they were heading to a country club luncheon. Oh, there you are, my mother said, spotting me from the kitchen. We were beginning to think you'd sleep through the whole thing. Wouldn't want to miss the excitement, I replied dryly. Aunt Candace swept into the room, immaculate in a cream pantsuit. Her eyes darted over my outfit with poorly concealed disapproval. Lane, darling, didn't you bring anything a bit more formal? Mr. Reichner is a Fortune 500 CEO, after all. This is fine, I said, pouring myself coffee. I'm not the one trying to impress him. She clicked her tongue. Well, perhaps wear something simple and just help Emma serve the refreshments. No need to draw attention. Before I could respond, Jasper, Bryn, and Roger appeared, ready for their morning walk, a family tradition during the holidays. Jasper was already in full networking mode, dressed in pressed khakis and a blue button-down that matched his father's. Come with us, Lane? Roger asked, more out of obligation than genuine invitation. Sure, I said, surprising them. I could use some fresh air. We set off down the quiet neighborhood streets, frost crunching beneath our feet. Jasper immediately launched into a monologue about his career aspirations. Reichner Industries is just the stepping stone, of course. 5 years there, build my network, then maybe venture capital or start my own consultancy. Sounds like you've got it all figured out, I said. That's the difference between us, cuz, he smirked. Some of us plan for success instead of just following orders. And some of us don't know when to shut up, I muttered too quietly for him to hear. Bryn linked her arm with his. Jasper's been featured in the alumni magazine twice already. They're calling him a rising star. How nice for him. What exactly do you do in the military anyway? Roger asked, his tone suggesting he expected my answer to involve peeling potatoes or filing paperwork. I work in strategic operations, I said vaguely. So, secretary stuff? Bryn asked with faux innocence. I bit back the truth, that I'd commanded units in 3 countries, that I'd been responsible for missions that altered international relations, that I'd made life and death decisions while they worried about promotion tracks and office politics. Something like that, I said instead. Must be frustrating, Jasper continued, being government property, no real autonomy, no chance for real achievement or recognition. I nearly laughed at the irony. If only he knew about the medals locked in my apartment safe, the commendations from generals and foreign dignitaries. It has its moments, was all I said. By the time we returned to the house, my patience was wearing thin. I excused myself to the basement, needing space before I said something I'd regret. As I descended the stairs, the familiar nightmare flashed in my mind, the mission that had earned me my colonel rank but cost Mikey his life. the desert heat. The unexpected intelligence about a high-value target. The split-second decision to change our approach. Mikey volunteering to take point. The sudden eruption of gunfire. My voice shouting orders over the chaos. Mikey's body motionless in the dust. I gasped, gripping the stair railing as the memory receded. These flashbacks had been less frequent lately, but being here, surrounded by people who couldn't begin to understand, seemed to trigger them. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. Sloane was sitting on my futon, a folder open on her lap, a folder containing printouts about me. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. She jumped, eyes wide with guilt and something else. "Oh, I'm sorry," she stammered. "I was looking for you, and then I saw these fell out of your bag." She held up a newspaper clipping with a blurry photo of a military ceremony. "This is you, isn't it? Colonel Lane Whitaker." My heart pounded. "Where did you get that?" "I searched your name online last night," she admitted, after we talked. There wasn't much, but there was this article about a covert operation leader being promoted to colonel. "And then I found these in your bag when I came to see if you were here." I moved forward and gently took the folder from her hands. Inside were the few public acknowledgments of my service I'd allowed myself to keep, carefully selected articles that mentioned my rank but few details, a photo from my promotion ceremony with faces of my team blurred for security, a letter of commendation with most of the text redacted. "Am I in trouble?" Sloane asked quietly. I sighed, sitting beside her on the futon. "No, but this isn't something I share with the family." "Why not?" "You're a hero. It says here you led some kind of rescue mission that saved American lives." "It's complicated, Sloane." "Because they wouldn't understand, or because they wouldn't care?" The question hit too close to home. "Maybe both." She was quiet for a moment, processing. "Does my mom know? Or Uncle Dale?" "No. And I'd prefer to keep it that way." "But why?" "They're all upstairs planning how to impress some corporate big shot when you've done things that actually matter, things that saved lives." I smiled at her indignation on my behalf. "Sometimes it's easier to let people believe what they want to believe." "That's stupid," she declared with teenage bluntness. "You should tell them. Maybe someday." I closed the folder. "But for now, can this be our secret?" She considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Okay, but on one condition." "What's that?" "Tell me a real story. Not the classified parts, just what it's actually like being Colonel Whitaker." I hesitated, then realized I'd been waiting years for someone in my family to ask that question. So I told her about basic training, about the first time I led a successful mission, about the weight of responsibility when other people's lives depend on your decisions. I kept it age-appropriate but honest, not sugarcoating the challenges or the fears. She listened with rapt attention, asking thoughtful questions that surprised me with their maturity. It felt good, better than I'd expected, to finally share even this small part of myself with someone who carried the same blood. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from upstairs. "Sloane." "Lane. Where are you?" "Mr. Reichner will be here in 30 minutes. Reality crashed back. I carefully tucked the folder into my duffel bag. "Remember, our secret?" She nodded, then impulsively gave me a hug. "I know who you really are," she whispered. Upstairs, the tension was palpable. My father paced in the living room, rehearsing talking points under his breath. Jasper stood before a mirror in the hallway, practicing his handshake and smile. Aunt Candace directed everyone like a general before battle, though the comparison made me smile privately. "Lane," she said when she spotted me, "would you help Emma bring out the appetizer trays when Mr. Reichner arrives and maybe stay in the kitchen during the business discussion?" "Whatever you need, Candace," I replied with practiced neutrality. My father paused his pacing to assess me. "Did you find something else to wear?" "This is fine, Dad." He frowned but was too preoccupied to argue. "Just try not to mention anything controversial. Mr. Reichner is very particular about company image." I nearly laughed. If he only knew the kinds of conversations I'd had with military and political leaders around the world, the negotiations I'd led, the diplomatic crises I'd helped navigate. I'll be on my best behavior, I promised. As the appointed time drew near, everyone took their positions like actors in a play, my father and Jasper near the door to greet their guest of honor, aunts and uncles arranged artfully in the living room, my mother and I in the kitchen ready with refreshments. The doorbell rang precisely on time. I heard my father's overly enthusiastic welcome, followed by a deep voice responding with practiced charm. Glasses clinked. Introductions were made. I stayed in the kitchen, arranging cookies on a silver platter, playing my assigned role. Lane, my mother whispered, "Can you bring this tray out? I need to check on the coffee." I nodded, picked up the platter, and stepped into the living room where Callum Reichner held court. He was tall and distinguished, with silver-streaked dark hair and the confident posture of a man accustomed to power. Jasper hovered nearby, laughing too loudly at something the CEO had said. My father was mid-sentence, explaining some aspect of their latest marketing campaign, when he spotted me. And this is my daughter, Lane," he said quickly, clearly hoping to move past the introduction. "Just visiting for the holidays." I stepped forward with the tray, planning to set it down and retreat to the kitchen as expected. But as I moved closer, Callum Reichner's eyes locked with mine. His expression shifted from polite interest to shock, then recognition. "Colonel Whitaker?" he asked, his voice cutting through the room's chatter. Every head turned. My father froze mid-gesture. Jasper's mouth fell open. I stood perfectly still, the tray suddenly heavy in my hands. "Mr. Reichner, I had no idea you were related to Dale," he continued, stepping toward me. "This is an unexpected honor." Before I could respond, he did something that sent a shockwave through the room. Callum Reichner, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a man my family had been desperately trying to impress, snapped to attention and saluted me. "It's an honor, ma'am." The silence that followed was absolute. I could feel the collective confusion, the disbelief radiating from my family. Sloane, standing in the doorway, didn't bother hiding her grin. The carefully constructed narrative about who I was, the family disappointment, the underachiever, the one who needed to be hidden away during important visits, crumbled in an instant. And in that moment, as I set down the tray and returned Reichner's salute with practiced precision, I realized that my two worlds had finally, inevitably collided. There would be no going back. The silence that followed Callum Reichner's salute seemed to stretch into eternity. I could almost hear the collective gears turning in my family's minds as they struggled to process what was happening. Jasper's smug expression had frozen into something between confusion and horror. Aunt Candace's mouth hung slightly open, her perfectly manicured hand clutching her pearl necklace. My father looked as though someone had pulled the floor out from beneath him. "At ease, Mr. Reichner," I finally said, my voice slipping into the authoritative tone I used at the Pentagon. "This is a social occasion." Callum lowered his hand but maintained his respectful posture. "Forgive me, Colonel." Force of habit when meeting someone of your distinction. The word colonel hung in the air like a thunderclap. I could feel Sloane's delighted gaze from across the room. My father stepped forward, his business smile wavering. "I'm sorry, did you say Colonel? You didn't tell me your daughter was Colonel Lane Whitaker," Callum said, turning to my father with genuine surprise. "One of the most respected strategic operations leaders in our military." We. My father stammered, looking at me as though seeing me for the first time. "Lane doesn't usually discuss her work." "With good reason," Callum nodded. "Much of it is classified, I imagine." He turned back to me, genuine respect in his eyes. "Colonel Whitaker, I've been hoping to meet you for some time. When the Joint Chiefs mentioned your name at last month's defense contractor briefing, I had no idea I'd have the opportunity so soon." Another wave of shock rippled through the room. Joint Chiefs. Defense briefing. These weren't terms my family associated with me. "You're familiar with my work?" I asked carefully. "As much as anyone outside certain clearance levels can be," he smiled. "The rescue operation in Eastern Europe 2 years ago, one of our senior engineers was among those extracted. He speaks of you with the highest regard." Jasper stepped forward, his composure somewhat recovered. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. Lane is just a highly decorated officer who has served her country with exceptional distinction, Callum finished for him, though I understand much of your work remains classified. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. This was surreal, having my accomplishments acknowledged in the last place I expected it. Perhaps we should all sit down, my mother suggested, her steady voice a lifeline in the chaos. The coffee is ready. We moved to the living room, the original seating plan abandoned as everyone scrambled to adjust to this new reality. Suddenly, no one was suggesting I stay in the kitchen. How long have you held the rank of colonel, if you don't mind my asking? Callum inquired once we were seated. 3 years, I answered. Before that, I was a lieutenant colonel with the Special Operations Command. Aunt Candace leaned forward. But you never mentioned. I mean, we thought you were just. Just what, Aunt Candace? I asked quietly. She had the decency to flush with embarrassment. Well, you know, an ordinary soldier. There's no such thing as an ordinary soldier, Callum interjected before I could respond. But Colonel Whitaker's service has been exceptional by any standard. My father cleared his throat. Lane has always been private about her career. Understandable, given the sensitive nature of her work, Callum nodded. He turned to address the room. Did you know that your daughter, your niece, has received commendations from 3 Secretaries of Defense administrations? The collective intake of breath was audible. Even I was surprised by how much Callum knew. That information isn't widely shared. Privilege of being a major defense contractor, he smiled. We hear things. Jasper, who had been uncharacteristically silent, finally found his voice. But she never went to college. She enlisted right after high school. Actually, I corrected, I completed my bachelor's degree through the military's distance learning program and my master's in international security from Georgetown. You have a master's degree? Bryn asked, her voice small. Among other qualifications, Callum added. Colonel Whitaker is well known in certain circles for her tactical innovations. In fact, several of her protocols have been adopted throughout the armed forces. The conversation continued in this vein, with Callum seemingly intent on highlighting my accomplishments while my family struggled to reconcile this new information with their long-held assumptions. It was vindicating and uncomfortable in equal measure. Throughout it all, I watched my father. He sat stiffly on the edge of his chair, hands clasped tightly in his lap, his expression unreadable. This wasn't how he'd planned this morning to go. His carefully orchestrated networking opportunity had transformed into something else entirely. When Callum excused himself to take a phone call, the room fell into an awkward silence. Everyone seemed afraid to meet my eyes, as though I'd suddenly transformed into someone they didn't know. Why didn't you tell us? Aunt Patricia finally asked. Would it have made a difference? I countered. No one had an answer for that. Callum returned, checking his watch apologetically. I'm afraid I need to head to my next appointment. The charity gala preparations wait for no one, not even CEOs. He turned to my father. Dale, thank you for your hospitality. We'll discuss the Simpson account next week at the office. My father nodded, struggling to recover his professional demeanor. Of course, Mr. Reichner. Thank you for coming. The pleasure was mine. Callum turned to me, extending his hand. Colonel Whitaker, it was an honor to finally meet you in person. I shook his hand firmly. Likewise, Mr. Reichner. I'd like to invite you to speak at the Veterans Recognition event we're hosting next week, he continued. It's part of our holiday charity initiative supporting families of deployed service members. Your perspective would be invaluable. Before I could respond, he added, and of course, your family would be welcome to attend. I'm sure they're very proud of your service. The pointed comment hung in the air between us. From his expression, I suspected he'd gleaned the truth of my family situation quite clearly. I'll consider it, I said diplomatically. As my father walked Callum to the door, I felt the weight of my family's stares. The narrative had shifted, and no one quite knew what to do with this new version of me. Sloane caught my eye from across the room and gave me a subtle thumbs up. At least one person was enjoying this unexpected turn of events. When my father returned, the room erupted into chaos, everyone talking at once, questions flying from all directions. A colonel? How is that possible? Why would you keep that secret? What exactly do you do that's so classified? Does this mean you outrank most of the military? I held up my hand, using the same gesture that could silence a room full of junior officers. Surprisingly, it worked on my family too. Yes, I'm a colonel. Yes, much of my work is classified. And yes, technically I outrank about 98% of active military personnel. I took a deep breath. I didn't tell you because none of you ever really asked. You all decided who I was and what my choices meant a long time ago. My father stepped forward, his expression still stunned. You should have said something. Like what, Dad? Hey, by the way, I'm not the failure you think I am? Would that have changed anything? He flinched as though I'd struck him. That's not fair. We never thought you, I interrupted, years of pent-up frustration finally breaking through. All of you did. When are you getting a real job, Lane? Still playing soldier. Nothing special. I quoted his own words back to him. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. No one could deny the truth of what I was saying. Jasper, never one to stay quiet for long, attempted to salvage his pride. Well, how are we supposed to know? It's not like you walk around in uniform. No, Jasper. I don't parade my service for validation. That's not why I do what I do. And what exactly is it that you do? Aunt Candace asked, her tone suggesting she still wasn't entirely convinced. I looked at her steadily. I lead people into dangerous situations to protect others. I make decisions that sometimes mean life or death. I serve something larger than myself or my ego. I paused. And most days, I'm pretty good at it. My mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. We had no idea, Lane. No idea at all. And that was the heart of it, wasn't it? They'd had no idea who I really was because they'd never bothered to look beyond their own assumptions. If you'll excuse me, I said quietly, I need some air. I walked out the front door without waiting for a response, breathing in the cold December air. Behind me, I could hear the eruption of voices, everyone talking at once again, analyzing, questioning, re-evaluating. It didn't matter. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen in my childhood home, and it had taken a complete stranger to make it happen. The house felt different after Callum Reichner's visit. Conversation stopped abruptly when I entered rooms. Glances followed me, curious, uncertain, sometimes embarrassed. My family orbited around me like I was a suddenly discovered planet, disrupting their well-established solar system. My father was the most affected. He buried himself in work, spending hours in his home office with the door firmly closed. When we did cross paths, he was overly polite, almost formal, as though speaking to a visiting dignitary rather than his daughter. I gave them all space, taking long walks around the neighborhood, visiting old haunts, calling Commander Gutierrez for updates on our unit. I considered cutting my visit short, but something kept me there, a sense of unfinished business, perhaps. The morning after Reichner's visit, I came downstairs to find Aunt Candace alone in the kitchen, stirring sugar into her coffee with unusual concentration. Good morning, I offered, reaching for a mug. Lane, I was hoping to catch you alone. Her tone was artificially bright, nothing like the dismissive one she'd used before. I was thinking we could have lunch today, just us girls. There's a lovely new bistro in town. I regarded her with mild surprise. Any particular reason? Well, we hardly get to talk with you being so busy with your career. She leaned forward conspiratorially. I'd love to hear more about your experiences. It all sounds so exciting. The sudden interest was transparent. Now that she knew I had status, enough to impress someone like Callum Reichner, I was worth getting to know. Thanks for the offer, Aunt Candace, but I already have plans today. It wasn't entirely a lie. I'd promised Sloane I'd help her with a school project. Oh. Her disappointment seemed genuine. Another time, perhaps, before you leave? I said noncommittally, pouring my coffee. She hesitated, then asked, "Is it very dangerous, what you do?" The question caught me off guard with its sincerity. Sometimes. I never thought, that is, we always assumed. She struggled to find the right words. That I was wasting my potential, I supplied. She had the grace to look embarrassed. We didn't understand. You didn't try to, I corrected gently. She nodded, accepting the truth of it. No, we didn't. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I'd expected from Aunt Candace. Perhaps there was hope for my family after all. Later that day, I found Jasper in the living room typing furiously on his laptop. He glanced up when I entered, his expression guarded. "Working on a Saturday?" I asked, sitting in the armchair across from him. "Just updating my LinkedIn profile," he muttered. With Reichner himself coming to the house, it's a networking opportunity one can't waste. Of course. He continued typing for a moment, then closed his laptop with a sigh. This is. You know what this whole situation is? You show up after years of barely communicating and suddenly you're some big military hotshot. It's like you set us up to look bad. I stared at him, incredulous. That's what you think happened here? Well, you never told anyone about your rank or whatever. Now we all look like idiots for not knowing. Maybe because every time I came home, all I heard was how I'd made the wrong choice, how I'd thrown away my potential, how disappointing I was. We were just concerned, he insisted. The military isn't exactly a prestigious career path. I laughed without humor. And there it is. You still don't get it. Get what? That not everything is about status or networking or impressing people at cocktail parties. I leaned forward. Some things are about service, Jasper, about putting something above yourself. He rolled his eyes. Here comes the patriotic lecture. No lecture, I said, standing up. Just an observation. You're so busy trying to climb the ladder that you've never stopped to ask if it's leaning against the right wall. I left him there knowing my words wouldn't change him. Some revelations couldn't be forced. In the afternoon, I helped Sloane with her history project, an analysis of Cold War strategies that she'd suddenly decided to focus on military leadership. Her questions were thoughtful, her enthusiasm genuine. It was refreshing. "Will you come to my school sometime?" she asked as we wrapped up. "For career day or something? The other kids would think you're so cool." I smiled. "If your mom and dad are okay with it, sure." "They will be now," she said with teenage bluntness. "Now that they know you're important." The observation stung with its accuracy. "Is that what you think too, that I'm only worth listening to because I have rank?" She considered this seriously. "No. I thought you were interesting before I knew." She hesitated. "But, it does make it easier to stand up to Mom when she says stuff about you." "What kind of stuff?" "You know, about how you're wasting your life, how you'll never have financial security, how you'll end up alone because no decent man wants a woman who's gone all the time." She rolled her eyes. "Boring, sexist stuff." I laughed despite myself. "Well, thank you for defending my honor." "That's what family does, right?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. Defends each other? The simple question carried the weight of everything that had gone wrong in our family. "Yes," I said softly. "That's exactly what family should do." I found my father in his study that evening, surrounded by papers but staring into space. He startled when I knocked on the open door. "Lane, do you need something?" "Just to talk, if you have a minute." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, his movements stiff. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. "Dad, I didn't know," he interrupted. "All this time, I had no idea what you were really doing." "You never asked." He looked down at his hands. "I was afraid to." "Afraid of what?" "Of losing you. Like James." His voice cracked slightly. "He went off to Vietnam a happy kid and came back broken. I watched my brother destroy himself piece by piece." "When you enlisted?" He shook his head. "I couldn't bear the thought of the same thing happening to you." The admission surprised me. My father had never been one to share his fears. So instead of supporting me, you dismissed what I was doing, I said, trying to understand. You made it smaller in your mind, less dangerous. If it wasn't important, you'd be safe, he acknowledged. Stupid, I know. Why didn't you just tell me that's what you were worried about? He gave a sad smile. Not really the Whitaker way, is it? Talking about feelings. I couldn't argue with that. Our family specialized in judgment, not vulnerability. I've been trying to protect you from the wrong things, he continued. Meanwhile, you've been out there facing real danger, making a difference, leading people. His voice filled with belated pride. A colonel. My daughter is a colonel. I tried to tell you in the beginning, I said. After my first promotion, I called home so excited, but you changed the subject to Jasper's new apartment. He winced at the memory. I was wrong. I was wrong about a lot of things. The admission hung between us, not quite an apology, but a start. I lost someone, I said suddenly, surprising myself with the disclosure. Under my command, Sergeant Mikey Gao. He was. I swallowed hard. He was a friend. He died protecting me and our unit. My father's eyes widened. Lane, I had no idea. How could you? We never really talked. I took a deep breath. I blamed myself for a long time. Still do some days. He had my back always. And when it mattered most, I couldn't save him. Is that why you never talk about your work? Because of what happened to him? I considered this. Partly. And partly because it felt like no one here wanted to hear it. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning. I'm sorry, Lane, for all of it. Me too, I whispered. We sat in silence for a while, but it was different now, heavy with unspoken history, but somehow lighter too, as though a weight had been partially lifted. When I stood to leave, he said, Callum Reichner called today, asked if you'd decided about speaking at that veterans event. I haven't decided yet. You should do it, he said quietly. I'd like to be there to hear you speak. I studied his face, seeing genuine interest for perhaps the first time. Okay, I said. I will. That night, as I was getting ready for bed in the basement, I heard footsteps on the stairs. My father appeared holding a hammer and a frame. What are you doing? I asked. Without answering, he walked to the living room wall where family photos hung in neat rows. I followed, curious. He removed a framed picture of Jasper at his MBA graduation and replaced it with another, me in my dress uniform at my promotion ceremony. A photo I didn't even know he had. There, he said simply. Where it belongs. He handed me the hammer and walked upstairs without another word, leaving me staring at my uniformed image now prominently displayed among the family photos. It wasn't everything, but it was something. The Veterans Recognition event was held at the Oak Ridge Community Center, transformed for the occasion with patriotic decorations and banners announcing Reichner Industries' support for military families. I arrived early, wearing my full dress uniform for the first time in my hometown. As I entered through the side door, Callum Reichner spotted me and came over immediately. Colonel Whitaker, thank you for agreeing to speak. He shook my hand warmly. Your perspective will mean a great deal to the families here. Happy to help, I said, glancing around at the growing crowd, local veterans, active service members and their families, community leaders, and to my surprise, several of my father's colleagues from Reichner Industries. I hope you don't mind, Callum said, following my gaze. I invited the entire regional office. I thought it was important for them to hear from someone like you. Before I could respond, the doors opened and my family filed in, all of them. My father and mother in front, followed by Aunt Patricia and Uncle Greg, Aunt Candace and Uncle Roger, Jasper, Bryn, and Sloan. They dressed formally for the occasion, as though attending a wedding rather than a veterans event. My father spotted me and walked over, looking slightly awestruck at the sight of me in full uniform with medals displayed. Lane, he said quietly. You look official? I supplied with a small smile. Impressive, he corrected. Very impressive. The ceremony began shortly after. Callum took the stage to welcome everyone and outline Reichner Industries' commitment to supporting military families. He spoke about sacrifice and service, about the importance of remembering those who protect our freedoms. And then he introduced me. "It is my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed room. Colonel Lane Whitaker is one of the finest leaders I've ever had the privilege to meet. Her strategic innovations have transformed military operations. Her leadership has saved countless lives. Her commitment to her country and her fellow service members is an example to us all. I walked to the podium amid applause, my heart pounding. Public speaking had never been my favorite part of the job, but I'd learned to do it well. Still, speaking in front of my family felt different, more vulnerable somehow. "Thank you, Mr. Reichner," I began, "and thank you all for being here today." I looked out at the audience, catching my father's eye in the front row. He nodded encouragingly. When people think about military service, they often focus on the sacrifice, the time away from loved ones, the physical hardships, the danger. And those things are real, very real. But what doesn't get discussed as often is what service gives back to us. I spoke about finding purpose in protecting others, about the bonds formed under pressure, about learning what truly matters when everything is stripped away. "I've been blessed to serve alongside heroes," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion beneath. "Men and women who put others before themselves every day, not for recognition or reward, but because they believe in something greater than themselves." I told the story of my unit, carefully avoiding classified details, and the mission that had defined my career. I spoke about leadership in the face of fear, about making decisions when there are no good options. And I spoke about Mikey Gao. Sergeant Mikey Gao was more than my squadmate. He was my friend, my confidant, the person who always spoke truth when I needed to hear it. He died making sure the rest of us made it home. I paused, looking directly at my father. Not a day goes by that I don't honor his memory by trying to be worthy of his sacrifice. When I finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. I saw tears in several eyes, including my mother's. Sloane was clapping wildly, pride evident on her face. Even Jasper looked moved, though he tried to hide it. After the ceremony, people lined up to shake my hand, to share their own stories of service or to thank me for mine. It was humbling and healing in equal measure. Eventually, the crowd thinned, and I found myself surrounded by just my family. There was an awkward moment of silence, and then Sloane broke it. "That was amazing, Aunt Lane," she said, hugging me tightly. "Thank you, sweetheart." One by one, the others offered congratulations and praise, genuine this time, not the backhanded compliments I'd grown accustomed to. Even Jasper managed a sincere "well done." My father waited until the others had moved toward the refreshment table, then stepped forward. "I've never been more proud," he said simply. "Or more sorry for not seeing who you really are all these years." "Dad, no, let me finish. I was wrong, Lane. Wrong to dismiss your choices. Wrong to minimize your service. Wrong to let my fear keep me from supporting you." He took a deep breath. "I can't change the past, but I can promise to do better going forward." It wasn't everything we needed to say to each other, but it was a start, a foundation we could build on. "I'd like that," I said softly. 2 weeks later, as my leave was ending, I received a call from Commander Gutierrez. "Colonel, the temporary assignment ends next week. The Pentagon has offered you a new post." "What kind of post?" I asked, packing my duffel bag in a now familiar basement. "Strategic development at Fort Benning. It would keep you stateside for at least 2 years, with only occasional overseas travel. Less field work, more policy." "Sounds boring," I said, but I was intrigued. After years of constant movement, the idea of stability had a certain appeal. "It's also 4 hours from your hometown," she added. "Close enough for regular visits." I glanced at the family photo on my nightstand, a new one taken at Christmas dinner after everything had changed. Everyone together, no one pushed to the margins or hidden away. "I'll think about it," I promised. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the futon considering the offer. For years I'd kept my distance from home, physically and emotionally. It had been easier that way, a clean break from the judgment and misunderstanding. But things were different now. Not perfect, there were still awkward moments, still old habits to break, but different. Better. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Sloane peeked in, wearing a West Point Academy sweatshirt I'd given her. "Mom says dinner's ready," she announced, "and Grandpa wants to know if you'll tell that story about the training exercise in Alaska." I smiled. "Tell him I'll be right up." As I followed her upstairs, I realized something had shifted within me. The anger I'd carried for so long had begun to fade, replaced by something quieter, not quite peace, but getting there. My family would never fully understand what I'd experienced, the weight I carried, the responsibilities I shouldered, but they were trying now. And maybe that was enough. In the dining room, everyone was gathered around the table. My father had saved the seat at his right hand for me, a place of honor. My mother had prepared my favorite meal. Aunt Candace asked a thoughtful question about my next assignment. It wasn't perfect, but it was family. Later that evening, I stood on the front porch of my childhood home, looking out at the quiet street. Behind me, I could hear the warm sounds of family conversation, of connection being rebuilt piece by piece. I pulled out my phone and called Commander Gutierrez. "About that post at Fort Benning," I said. "I'll take it." It was time to build a bridge between my worlds, the colonel and the daughter, the leader and the family member. Time to be whole, not divided. As I went back inside to share my decision, I caught sight of my uniformed photo on the wall, now hanging proudly among the family gallery. No longer hidden, no longer diminished. Finally seen, not just for my rank or accomplishments, but for who I'd always been, a Whitaker who'd found her own path, her own kind of honor, and in doing so helped her family find theirs.